Last week I introduced you to St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest minds the world has ever seen. This week we're going to look at one of his famous teachings, the 5 proofs for God's existence. Now, this doesn't mean proofs in the way that we might think of proof. What Thomas means when he says proofs for God's existence are, these are ways to show that believing in God is reasonable, that intelligent people who think very deeply about these things can have these reasons to believe that God does truly exist. So here are Aquinas' 5 proofs for the existence of God. Number 1, the first mover. When we look around, we can see that things are in motion. Every body in the universe is in motion, meaning that it is moving. But we know from Isaac Newton's first law of motion that everything at rest stays at rest until it is acted upon by something that is already in motion. That is to say, objects cannot put themselves into motion. Something else has to put them into motion. So everything in our world that is in motion has been put into motion by something else. And that applies to us as well. Our hearts are in motion, constantly pumping blood through our veins. Our organs are in motion, working to keep our bodies going. And we didn't put those things into motion. Our mothers put us into motion when we were being formed in their wombs. So logically, there has to be a first mover, something that set everything else into motion. Otherwise, we would have to say, well, this put this thing into motion, which put this thing into motion, which put this thing into motion, and we would have to go all the way back infinitely, which is a logical impossibility. There has to be at some point something that was itself unmoved that moved everything else. So whatever that first cause of motion was, we call it God. Number 2, the first cause. This one is similar to the first mover, but it is about existence, not movement. Nothing is the cause of its own existence. I didn't bring myself into existence. You didn't bring yourself into existence. Our planet didn't bring itself into existence. Everything that exists was brought into existence by something else. But again, this trail of causes can't go all the way back infinitely because that's a logical impossibility. At some point in our history, there has to be something that was uncaused, that caused the existence to begin. Something that is existence itself, something that's very nature is to exist. Whatever that first cause is, we call it God. Number 3, the argument from contingency. If something is contingent, it means it doesn't have to exist, or it doesn't have to exist the way that it does. At one point in time, none of you who were watching this video existed. You hadn't yet been formed in your mother's womb. But things were still happening when you didn't exist. Thus, it's not necessary for you to exist. It's a gift for you to exist. But the problem is, everything in our universe seems to be contingent. None of it is ultimately necessary. It could be different, but if something doesn't have to exist, it means that there was a time when it didn't exist. And since everything in our universe is contingent, it means that there has to have been a time when none of it existed, when there was nothing. But if that's the case, then nothing would exist now. Because as we saw earlier, nothing can bring its own self into existence. So in order for contingent things to exist, there has to be something that is not contingent. That is to say, there has to be something that exists necessarily, something that could not be any different than the way it is. So whatever this thing is that is not contingent, the thing that has to exist by its very nature, we call it God. Number 4, the argument from goodness. All of us have an idea of what is good and what is bad. We look at Saint Mother Teresa and we say good. We look at Adolf Hitler and we say bad. But how are we making this judgment? How can we say one thing is better than another? We all do this, regardless of our religious beliefs. We even do it with inanimate objects. If a chair is comfortable, we call it a good chair. But if the chair is uncomfortable or if it breaks, we say it is a bad chair. In order for us to make any sort of judgment, we have to have some sort of idea of what is the best case. For example, we can say something is colder than something else because the thing we're calling colder more closely resembles coldest, the idea of coldest. So for us to say something is good, what we mean is it more closely resembles what is best. So there has to be something that actually is best. Something that is goodness, and our idea of goodness comes from how close this thing or person is to that ultimate goodness, goodness itself. Whatever that ultimate goodness is, we call it God. Number 5, the argument from design. It seems that things in nature are working towards some goal, even if they aren't intelligent. Plants have the goal of growing and spreading their seeds, even though they aren't intelligent. If you shoot an arrow at a target, the target is the arrow's goal, but the arrow isn't intelligent. It receives its goal by being directed by something that is intelligent. So in order for things without intelligence to be directed towards some goal, there has to be something with intelligence that guides it toward that goal. Someone who has designed the world in a way where even unintelligent things are working towards some goal. So whoever that designer is, we call it God. These are the proofs Aquinas came up with, and others have come up with other proofs or reasons to say that belief in God is reasonable. Maybe you can think of some others as well. Now please read the material below and answer the reflection questions. Have a great week.